Good evening, BookTube. This is Johnny. I thought I would make a video not really having any set purpose or design. It's kind of like I wanted to make a video to, what's the word? It is my 65th birthday today. I'm 65 years old today. And it's kind of strange because my wife's father, he died when he was 64. I think my grandfather died when he was 64. And yeah, so I've lived longer than my wife's father and my own grandfather. So it's kind of strange when you're 65 years old because I'm still doing basically the same things I did when I was young. But the basic things I've always done is I've always been writing in my diary since I was in my late teens. And I've always been reading books. And I've always been in libraries. I've always been looking at books. Someone asked me a question in BookTube, how many books have I read? And they were looking at a video I made of the lower level of all the books that are down the lower level of the house. We have a two-level house. We have an open basement down the lower level. And when our children are growing up, we have 3 children who are all married, 1 girl and 2 boys. And the boys their bedrooms were downstairs in the lower level. And that's where they grew up. And when they went off to college and got married, I took over the lower level as where I have my books. Well, our books. I have to include my wife. Everything that I have belongs to my wife, and everything my wife has belongs to me. We're one mind, one flesh, one spirit. My wife's always reminding me, it's just not I, it's we. And I think I fall into that because I write all the time, and I don't use we or our. I use I, and my wife gets kind of perturbed at me because we are we. We are one. We are married. We are a couple. And we've been married going on 38 years. So yeah, so I'm 65 years old, and it's kind of, so I thought I'd just make a video saying what I did on my 65th birthday. And what we did this morning, my wife always gives me a birthday card, and she made me chocolate chip oatmeal cookies since I had a chocolate cake last week. She bought 2. She's always spoiling me. And then this morning we went out for breakfast. When we go out for meals, my favorite meal to go out is generally breakfast, because to be honest, you go to a restaurant and you don't really have much of a choice when you go to a restaurant. And I'm not really into eating food. I'm not really a big food person. I just like basic food. And so when you go out for breakfast, since I had my gallbladder out, I don't eat eggs. I can eat sausage, and I usually have a sausage and pancakes. So that's what we had this morning. We went out for breakfast, a local place. I had blueberry pancakes and sausage and a glass of water, and my wife had an omelet with toast and water. And then we went for a walk at Upper Makatawa Natural Area, and I took photos with my newest camera. It was a pretty morning. My wife, unfortunately, got bit up by mosquitoes, and mosquitoes don't bite me. I don't get bug bites. When I go out for walks, mosquitoes don't bother me. But my poor wife, she came home with bites all over her, and so she was really not happy with that. She can lay in bed at night and get bit by mosquitoes, and I never get bit by mosquitoes. So after our walk, we came home, and I didn't really go anywhere else. I think my wife and I just stayed at home. Yeah, I don't think my wife went anywhere. She did take a nap. And I basically read today, I mentioned the Grove Chapel Pulpit Sermons by Joseph Irons. This is volume 1. I read that today. And I read this book, Conversation, A History of a Declining Art by Stephen Miller. And tonight I've been reading the new annotated Frankenstein. Frankenstein was written by Mary Shelley. This is the new annotated Frankenstein. Mary Shelley edited with a foreword and notes by Leslie S. Klinger. And I've been reading with great interest the foreword, which goes into the life of Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, Lord Byron, and Mary Shelley was the daughter of a fellow named Godwin, who I can't remember his first name. Mary's mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, and she died in childbirth when she gave birth to Mary. I have a biography of Mary Wollstonecraft down the lower level that I should get out and look at. She seemed like a very interesting person. So on my 65th birthday, I basically watched the birds. I wrote in my diary. I ended today on page 737. It is August the 14th, 2017. It is 10:17 at night here in West Michigan. And I always go to bed at 11 o'clock, and I usually get up around 6:30. I'm a creature of habit. I like routine. I don't like being busy. I don't like appointments. I don't like going anywhere. Now, I don't mind going to thrift stores or used book sales, or maybe visiting our oldest son and his wife and Josie Joy in Grand Rapids. But I don't like leaving the house. And that goes back to, I was looking at my life. I'm 65 years old, and I've always been a loner. I've always liked, I'm sociable. I'm not antisocial. But I live my life inside my brain. I'm kind of like, I'm a dreamer in a way. I'm always just off in my head. I don't consider myself super smart. I'm just a dreamer. I'm just a bookworm, a person who likes to write. When it comes to reading, I don't really finish most of the books that I read. I noticed that in book 2, people are always saying, well, I read this many books this month, or I read this many books this week, and I finished this book this weekend. I rarely finish a book, and most of what I read is nonfiction. I do read novels, I do read essays, short stories, letters, biographies. I read New Testament theology, commentaries, Puritan literature, covenantal theology. I read it, but I just like the act of reading. I'm not really Now, sometimes if I get something, I don't think I've ever finished a nonfiction book. I don't think I've ever finished a nonfiction book. I have finished novels. I have finished, I read 4 sermons by Joseph Irons, and I'm reading, I'll continue to read this tomorrow morning, and I probably will read Frankenstein. I don't know how long. I like to get into the text of Frankenstein and read actually the novel Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. But I'm enjoying just reading the foreword right now. When I was really young in high school, back in the late 60s, I was really into the romantic poets, Shelley and Byron, and I used to carry around their poetry in my backpack. And then I became a Christian after high school, and then I got into reading the Bible. That was about 1970. As I said, I became a Christian in 1970 in the month of August is when the Lord drew me to himself, and I've been seeking to live a Christian life since August 1970. And during those early years of my Christian life, I did read. Among the Jesus people, there were certain books that you read, like Francis Schaeffer, and then when I got into the higher life, it was Andrew Murray. But back in those early days, from 1970 to 1975, while I was in college, so obviously I read textbooks, and then around 73, late 72, 73, I lived in Christian communes, and I was among Jesus people, and so we just read the Bible and had Bible studies and went to church and things like that. And then I joined a rescue mission, I think around 1974. And when you work in a rescue mission, you're always having Bible studies in the morning and afternoon and evenings. There's always worship services, and I did go to church with my girlfriends back in those days. And so I read a lot of, I didn't read much, because when you're in the fundamentalism, basic American Christianity is very anti-intellectual. It's more into the emotions and a simplistic Armenian gospel. But when around 1970, I was in Berkeley, California, and I picked up a commentary on the Epistle of Hebrews, which is in the New Testament, and that commentary was by A.W. Pink. And A.W. Pink was a Calvinistic Baptist. And when I read that commentary by A.W. Pink, he was always quoting the 17th century English Puritans. And I was really, and then if you read the writings of A.W. Pink, he is very critical of modern evangelicalism, modern evangelism, which is basically man-centered gospel, Arminianism, free will, very shallow, basically an unbiblical gospel. And so, to make a long story short, I started reading the 17th century English Puritans. I found a church in Berkeley, Orthodox Presbyterian Church. As I've mentioned in past videos, they had a great church library of all the old English Puritan works, a whole wall of them, and I just read those. And I didn't have any money in those days. If I had some money, I would buy some Calvinistic works. And then I left the rescue mission around 1977, and I left California, and I went to Bible college, Reformed Bible College, here in Michigan in Grand Rapids, and that's where I met Carol. and we got married. And we've been married 38 years. And over these 38 years, I can't keep track of all that I've read. I finished Bible college. I've accumulated a big, huge library of a conservative, Presbyterian, Calvinistic, pietistic, evangelical, Bible-believing Christian. And I've always been into the beatniks, Jack Kerouac, Ginsberg, William Burroughs. I've always been into people like James Joyce, the modernists, Gertrude Stein, people like that. As far as the 1960s writers, I got into John Updike, and always been in Norman Mailer and people like that, Philip Roth. And so, yeah, but mainly over those years, I went to Bible college and seminary, and then I did an internship. We moved to Texas, and I got really involved in Christian spirituality and Christian mysticism and read a lot of that, and that's where I got into the contemplative life, got into the church history, the history of doctrine, got into the writings of Thomas Merton, into the Carthusians, the Dominicans, the Franciscans, and I got more into New Testament, 19th and 20th century scholarship. Instead of just focusing on Reformed theology, I got more into Pauline theology, New Testament theology, into the writings of the Apostle Paul, and not so much following the Puritans or John Calvin. And so all my reading these days are into those areas. So when a person asks me, what have you read? It's kind of, I've read a lot of stuff over the years. And since I retired, I stopped working in 2007. So the last 10 years, I've started reading everything that interests me. Poetry, history, biography. But I continue to read Calvinistic literature. I still read like a Presbyterian minister in a Bible-believing church. But I do like other stuff. But once again, I'm a dreamer. I spend a lot of time just thinking, spend a lot of time writing. I spend a lot of time in silence. Even though I do, today I got 3 CDs in the mail today. Lord Mantis, I got Black Cilice, but I like just sitting in the presence of God in silence. One thing about being a Christian, you're never alone. You're never really alone. You're always in the presence of God. What you say, what you think, how you live, what you do, how you interact, how you are a father or a husband or a grandpa or an employee or whatever, that you have to answer for what you say and what you do before God. There is a day of judgment. There is a day of accountability. And it's not saying I live in fear. I think if what motivates us in all that we do is love for our children, love for our neighbors, love for our wives and for our husbands, love for those, then that will dictate how we treat people and our ethics. If you love somebody, you don't want to hurt them. You don't want to steal from them. You don't want to lie to them. You want the good. You want the best for them. You want to serve them. You want to help them. You want to to be a blessing. And I know, and I've been, like I said, been married to Carol for 38 years, and I fail miserably loving her the way she should be loved. But that's where forgiveness of sins comes in. So yeah, so I'm 65 years old, and I don't remember all that I've read all these years. But I continue to read. I love to read, and I will continue to read. And tomorrow, I get a book in the mail tomorrow. I wrote it down here in my diary. Tomorrow, I get a book. The World Broke in Two. Virginia Woolf, T.S. Eliot, D.H. Lawrence, E.M. Foster, and the Year That Changed Literature by Bill Goldstein. So I'm supposed to get that in the mail tomorrow. So yeah, this is my 65th birthday. I don't know how long the Lord will have me living on this earth. But I know that my desire is to be with the Lord forever and with his people and the elect angels and the new creation. I long to be holy as God is holy. I long to love unselfishly, to die to self, that I might be a light in this world that to me is just going absolutely insane. So I thought I'd share these thoughts with you on my 65th birthday. Hoping you'll have a good week, and until next time, bye.